Part 4. Getting into flow. The conditions of flow. As children, we are taught not to play with fire, not how to play with fire. Stephen Kotler. Chapter 11. Internal flow triggers. Flow state is universal, showing up in anyone, provided certain initial conditions are met. Originally, Csikszentmihalyi called these conditions proximal conditions for flow, but this has since been shortened to flow triggers, preconditions that lead to flow. Researchers identified 22 different flow triggers. There are probably more. Yet they all share one thing in common. Flow follows focus. The state can only arise when all of our attention is directed at the present moment. So, that's what precisely all these triggers do. They drive attention into the now in one of two ways. One, they push dopamine and norepinephrine into our system. And two, they lower cognitive load. The lowering of cognitive load is the psychological weight of all the stuff we're thinking about at any moment in time. By lowering the cognitive load, we're liberating energy, which the brain can then repurpose for paying attention to the task at hand. Let me illustrate this with one of the flow triggers we're already familiar with. The challenge-skill ratio. Flow occurs at the edge of our ability, the spot where the task is hard enough to make us stretch, but not hard enough to make us snap. To achieve a state of flow, you'll need to operate on a fine line between challenge and skill level. The idea is relatively straightforward. Flow follows focus, and we pay the most attention to the task at hand when the challenge of that task slightly exceeds our skill set. Think challenging, yet manageable. Just enough stimulation to shortcut attention into the now, not too much stress to pull you back out again. When we are pushing past our limits, talents, and advancing our abilities, the brain rewards this effort with dopamine. And because dopamine enhances focus even more, this increases our chances of getting into flow. I love mountain biking. The challenge of learning and improving is precisely what draws me to highly skilled activities, like mountain biking. The moment I drop into the track, I immediately feel the sensation of dopamine and norepinephrine spiking up. While I might not be in flow, enough of my attention is focused on the task at hand, biking, to be moving me in the right direction. To push myself into flow, what I need to do is something that drives me into my challenge skill sweet spot. I could amp up my speed, or I could find that steep track with cheeky corners that, on my last trip through, required some serious turns and bumps on my way down. By doing either, I've upped the challenge level a little bit, and my brain rewards that risk-taking effort with even more dopamine. Suddenly, there's enough neurochemistry in my system to push me into flow. Once in flow, it isn't just my mind paying more attention. Suddenly, my entire body is paying attention. Still, there is tension and threat, but there are no words, no mind, no distractions. All the track features speak to me, and I to them with motion. There is joy and release and an overall deep sense of deep embodiment. I am literally flowing with part of the flow of the world. The sweet spot for flow is when the challenge just exceeds our ability. An elite athlete will find the challenge skill balance in a World Cup finale. A basketball player can allow himself to shoot only from behind the three-point line. A soccer player may challenge himself to win every second ball. A musician may challenge herself to play for an audience. Challenge is an important component of flow, but it is the interconnection of challenge with skill, along with the expression of other flow conditions, that creates this optimal experience. Immediate feedback. It would be impossible to participate in any sport if one didn't know, moment by moment, how things are going. A tennis player sees where her shots were landing, or a skier sees whether she was on or off the trail. Immediate feedback is critical to successful performance. And athletes who are tuned into the feedback loop given by their own movement and bodies, as well as by external cues in the environment, are able to tap into flow. One of the advantages of sport is the number of potential sources of feedback it can provide. The coaching staff is able to give advice during breaks, spectators provide feedback by applauding, the body itself provides probably the most important feedback though. For example, a swimmer knows by the feel of the arms and body through the water whether he's creating a smooth stroke, or, alternatively, too much drag. A tennis player knows when she swings the racket whether her positioning is correct or needs adjusting. Feedback is neither good nor bad in itself. It is simply information that can be used to monitor and adjust performance as needed. The importance here is that the focus must be on immediate feedback, not just feedback. The definition of immediate refers to a direct, in-the-moment coupling between cause and effect. The smaller the gap between cause and effect, the more we know how we're doing and how to steer when we're off course. The athlete who focuses on the scoreboard or time board that tells how close he is to winning or losing can be easily distracted and lose his presence. But a runner who checks his time every mile and makes any necessary adjustments is likely to get into flow. Learning to use feedback to your advantage is a critical part for creating flow, especially if you're able to use this feedback loop when things aren't going that flowy. Watching professional sports provides illustrations of how skilled and disciplined athletes can use feedback about unsuccessful performance. For example, in the NBA basketball finals, Michael Jordan had shot 2 for 21 in the first 3 quarters of a game. He came back to make 20 points in the fourth. Jordan didn't need to know his statistics to tell that his game was off. The handling of the ball, the missed timing, and other cues Jordan has learned to pay attention to told him he needed to do something differently. He demonstrated his ability to refocus on his play and to read the game, and turn things around on many occasions. Clear goals. Many athletes and coaches use goal setting to help get where they want to go, both for the long and the short term. But if creating more flow is our aim, then the emphasis falls on clear and not goals. Clarity gives us direction. We know what to do, and we know where to focus our attention while doing it, and therefore increasing our chances to get into flow. This is because clarity of intention helps to focus attention and avoid distraction. What is required is clear, and there is no need to second guess or doubt what one is doing. In our attempt to understand how clear goals impact our attention, I'll take you back to a study in 2003 called the Invisible Gorilla Experiment. The experiment was conducted by 2 leading cognitive psychology researchers, Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons. It's one of psychology's most famous experiments. Simon showed a short film of basketball players passing a ball around a court to his students and asked them to count the passes. When the film was over, he had one question: how many people saw the gorilla? As it happened, midway through the clip, a guy in a gorilla costume walked to the middle of a circle of the basketball players, beat his chest a few times, then walked off. Most of the students didn't see the gorilla. Simon's invisible gorilla experiment had since been repeated dozens of times, and always with the same result. Not many people see the gorilla. So what's the point? The point is, when the brain is charged with a clear goal, focus narrows considerably. The unimportant is disregarded, and the now is all that is left. In the now, there's no past or future, and a lot less room for all the stuff we're thinking about all day. So when we define clear goals, we replace the chattering voice in our head with in-the-moment attention. Having clear goals for all the components of performance ensures you're paying attention to the relevant cues, and only to them. Chapter 12. External Flow Triggers. The experience we call flow is actually a spectrum of experiences. In a sense, the state is likely any other emotion. You can be in a low-grade micro-flow state on one end of the spectrum, or a full-blown macro-flow state on the other. There are 3 external triggers that make flow more likely to occur: high-risk environments, rich environments, and deep embodiment. Let's dive into these one at a time. High-risk consequences. High consequences are about threats lurking in our environment. It's Hamilton riding the Chopu wave, a high-consequence environment. It's a skier on the edge of a really steep slope. It's Michael Jordan taking a shot in the free throw line in overtime of the NBA playoffs. In whatever case, the high-risk consequence is a built-in feature of the experience, and it always has to do with the environment we place ourselves in. I mentioned risk-taking earlier in relation to the challenge-skill ratio. The main difference here is that risk-taking regarding the challenge-skill ratio is more an internal approach to the task at hand rather than an external quality found in the environment. Whether the risk is in the environment or an inner risk, like pushing the edge of a challenge skill ratio, it is a serious thing that has to be considered and well understood. Why? Risk plays a considerable role in our ability to play with this trigger for starters. Risk increases the amount of norepinephrine and dopamine in our system. This is also why extreme athletes are often called adrenaline junkies. But very few people actually like the feeling of adrenaline. Stephen Kotler interviewed hundreds of action and adventure athletes in his book The Rise of Superman. He noted that most share professional kayaker Theo Berman's sentiment when he says, "I'm the farthest thing from an adrenaline junkie. I can't stand that feeling. If I'm feeling adrenaline, it means I'm feeling too much fear. It means I haven't done my homework. It means it's time to get out of my kayak to reassess." But near all of them like the rush of dopamine and norepinephrine pumped into our system. Work done by Robert Sapolsky at Stanford shows that the neurochemical spike produced by this high-consequence trigger comes very close in size to the spike produced by substances such as cocaine. It's a nearly 700% boost in dopamine, which leads to a massive boost in focus, which easily drives one into flow. This is a very effective strategy, but as the term suggests, also a hazardous one. It's important to emphasize that the high consequences trigger doesn't necessarily mean physical risk. Taking physical risk being only one of the risks. You can also use emotional risk, social risk, creative risk. It doesn't matter. Rich environment. Our next external flow trigger is rich environment. This flow trigger combines novelty, unpredictability, and complexity, 3 elements that catch and hold our attention. Novelty, for example, is one of our brain's favorite experiences. It's actually hardwired into our brains. Anything new, different, or unusual is bound to catch our attention. From an evolutionary perspective, novelty means that either danger or opportunity is lurking in our environments. Since both are crucial for survival, the brain prioritizes the information. Unpredictability means that we don't know what happens next. Thus, we pay more attention to what happens next. Complexity shows up when there's a lot of salient information coming at us at once. This is the experience of the ah moment, where we get so sucked in by the beauty and magnitude of what we're contemplating that time slows down and the moment stretches on into infinity. Put the 3 together, and you have one of the most potent external flow triggers: rich environment. The outdoor retailer Patagonia can give us an excellent example of how they incorporated the rich environment in their philosophy. Because the company is filled with outdoor athletes, and their corporate headquarters sit right on the Pacific, whenever the waves are good, employees are allowed to stop working and go surfing, even when they're on a deadline, even if they're in the middle of a meeting. It's a corporate policy that Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard famously dubbed as, "Let my people go surfing." Why surfing? Well, the sport has a high likelihood of driving participants into flow because of the combination of novelty, unpredictability, and complexity that is deeply rooted in the sport. In surfing, no 2 waves are the same, but you don't have to be a surfer to experience these highly potent flow triggers. In fact, most of us have some familiarity with a rich environment triggering flow. If you've ever stood before a waterfall and felt awe, well, awe is a state of total absorption and the beginning stage of flow. When sucked in by the incomprehensible complexity of geological timescales and epic beauty, reality pauses, if only for a moment. And in this moment, we taste the pinpoint focus, loss of self-consciousness, and time dilation that are deep zone companions. Deep embodiment. Deep embodiment means paying attention to all the sensory inputs at once. It's kind of a full body awareness. Humans have sensory inputs all over the place. 50% of our nerve endings are in our hands, feet, and face. And more inputs means more data. More data means an overload of the brain with information. Therefore, the explicit system needs to be bypassed, as discussed in part 1 of the book. The brain's explicit system can't process fast incoming information consciously. It's too slow, too inefficient, and too dangerous in many ways. When critical data arrives, there's no time for neurotic debate. Tasks that require real-time sensory-motor integration are best handled by the implicit system, explained Arnie Dietrich in a 2011 paper for Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews. Explicit interference into the execution of these kinds of tasks tend to decrease their effectiveness. This is one of the main reasons athletes have so much success getting into flow. Sport demands embodiment. It's built into the environment. And most experts agree, when it comes to deep embodiment, there's little substitute for the physical. By getting into physical activities like skiing, surfing, biking, yoga, tai chi, there's no way the conscious mind can keep up. If you start thinking, you'll fall off or mess up. This is why deep embodiment is such a powerful trigger to find flow. If we want to pull the deep embodiment trigger in less challenging environments, we simply must learn to pay attention to all these input streams. This isn't hard. Zen walking meditation teaches open sense awareness. Balance and agility training, like playing hopscotch or riding ladder drills, enhance proprioception and vestibular awareness. Yoga, tai chi, and just about every martial art blend both together. My personal favorite is an intense form of silent meditation, in which you must be continuously alert and aware throughout. Each meditation lasts for 1 hour and requires you to keep your eyes closed throughout. This forces you to concentrate fully on your breath, skin, and scanning the body's sensation into a state of deep embodiment. In conclusion, we see that flow is more than an optimal state of consciousness, where we feel our best and perform our best. Flow is what makes life worth living. There are moments that stand out from the chaos of the everyday as shining beacons, wrote Csikszentmihalyi in Flow. In many ways, one might say the whole effort of human mankind through millennia of history has been to capture these fleeting moments of fulfillment and make them part of everyday existence. Thank you. Thank you for reading this book. Are you excited? Share the flow theory with others. It's a good way for you to master the material even better. You can also help me enormously to further publicize flow in sport by leaving reviews at places such as Amazon.com and Goodreads.com. For other works and books, check out my website, www.minasloekan.com. May the flow be with you. Minas Loekan.